What is up, everybody? It is Alex from Heavy New York, and on the phone we got Jesse from 10 Years. Thank you for your time today. I appreciate it.
My pleasure, man.
Yep. It's so awesome to have you here. The new album, Violent Allies, which is scheduled to come out this September. Could these singles that you released so far, The Shift and The Unknown, can this serve as maybe like a clear representation of what Violent Allies is going to sound like, or is this just like scratching the surface, you would say?
Those songs are so polar opposite of each other. I guess it would be representative of the album itself, because it's kind of pretty diverse in its soundscapes and where it takes you. So we try to have a lot of peaks and valleys inside our music for sure. So it kind of represents it well, I would say.
Yeah. Do you consider this like conceptually just a direct follow-up to How to Live as Ghosts, or do you think that this is like almost a new start for 10 Years?
It was definitely a different approach. The three originals that are left in the band, myself, Brian, and Matt, have got to, over all the years now, we've been doing this as a job for over 15 years, and a lot of ups and downs and learning and growing, and we finally got to a place with ourselves where the reason it's called Violent Allies is because we understand the importance of our unity, but without the fight and sort of the test of back and forth with each other, we wouldn't question and push each other to kind of step out of our individual comfort zones. And I think that's the collective of all of us is what makes 10 Years 10 Years. So it kind of, we can be very opinionated individually, but we ultimately come to an agreement as a whole.
Yeah. Well, as a fan of 10 Years, if you were to play me, like, a small portion of a song, I could tell that that's off of The Autumn Effect, or that's off of Division, that's off of Feeding the Wolves, etc. So I think it's fair to say that 10 Years has always taken, like, a new approach to every single album, right?
Of course, yeah. We never ever wanted to be one of those bands that kind of found a sound that worked and just stuck to it, because it stunted our creativity by doing that. We really wanted to travel in a different direction each time, and sometimes the results are better than others, but each time we definitely wanted to tread in new water and new territory to challenge ourselves for something new. So we felt like if you take our discography and our whole catalog, album to album, you can definitely tell they're different from album to album, and it gets, sometimes it's a battle, and you have fans that want you to stay the same, and you have fans that want new, different directions. And for the artist, I think it's important for us to be able to have that creative freedom to always explore new sounds and avenues, I guess.
Yeah, so it has to make, like, almost making a new album easier, right? Because you're not, like, enslaved to a certain formula or something, right?
Yes and no. If you have a formula, you just kind of plug and play, and it writes itself. I think it can actually be a little more difficult, because this many albums in, this many years doing it, get stumped with, feel like I've done this before, I've written this before, and it's impossible to not kind of rip yourself off, because that's just your natural tendency. Like, I have a way about lyrics and melodies that is me, so it's kind of, I have to, at some point I had to just embrace that and realize that that's just sort of my thumbprint on it. But it can be very challenging to try to find a new direction, because of so many years of doing it. Every time you're like, well, I've done this before, so you scratch it and try it again.
Yeah. Did maybe revisiting The Autumn Effect, like, on your last album cycle, maybe, like, make you explore some older material? Like, did you try to maybe, I don't want to say replicate, but maybe, like, revisit, like, the older sides of you guys?
Well, definitely, each album's its own time. It's pretty much that albums are just capturing those moments in time of our lives and where we're at as people in those moments. And The Autumn Effect was by far the most free and innocent and pure that we'd ever created, because no success was put upon us yet. When you have the weight of success put on you, it does change, and it's impossible. It's like when you lose your innocence, you never get it back. So we always go back to The Autumn Effect just for the nostalgia of it, and really try to listen to it from an outsider and be inspired by it, because that's a one-time thing to have that. But the one thing we do take from the Autumn Effect, and we really think we applied to this album in particular, is just immersing ourselves in each song and really trying to find joy in it and trying to find the best, I guess, energy or attitude to put towards it, whether it's a lyrically tough topic to talk about that's sad or angry or happy, whatever, but like dive completely into it, and that's exactly what we did on the Autumn Effect.
Mm-hmm. Well, one thing I was really curious about is, because you came in, I believe that, correct me if I'm wrong, but your first record with the band was Killing All That Holds You, right? You came into the band like later that time?
Yes.
Yeah, so...
Well, yeah.
So
the original guys formed in 99, and I came in about 2001.
Okay. So when you came into 10 Years, were you kind of looking at the Into the Half Moon album, being like, okay, this is how I have to play, this is what I want to do, or did the band kind of want you to bring your own mix into the...
Well, the funny thing with that's a great question, but I was actually a pretty big fan of 10 Years locally back then with Into the Half Moon, and the only reason I ended up where I am now is because I would keep bugging them with flyers to come check out the other band I was in, and when they approached me to fill that spot, I was so intimidated by it that I absolutely thought that there was no way I could recreate what the original guy, Mike Underdown, did, because it was his own style. It was a lot more screaming. He definitely screamed a lot more than I did, but it was his own thing. I didn't feel like I wanted to take that away from him. So the one stipulation that wasn't a stipulation, but I think we all agreed, was when I joined the band that it was almost like starting over fresh and not trying to mimic any of that first album.
I think it worked out great, because Killing All That Holds You and the Autumn Effect and Division, I think you guys really got the ball rolling with it.
Yeah, we were very fortunate, and it was just sometimes energy and moments just happen. The stars align. I always tell people, like, it takes hard work and practice and perseverance and luck.
Definitely being at the right place at the right time.
Mm-hmm.
As a vocalist, do you need to hear music in order to come up with lyrics, or has there ever been a time where maybe you have like lyrics or a concept or a story, and that maybe could help influence the sound itself?
I do it both ways. I do it where I'll have a lot of times where I'll have poetry or lines or sort of just observing society and just kind of things that pop into my head, and I'll put that in my notes in my phone or in a notebook, and I'll just keep that separate for a while, and then if a melody's completely different, I could have a melody that's separate from a lyrical start, and somewhere along the lines I can marry those two. So it's always just kind of like keeping the creative brain going, and if something pops in my head, I drive my family crazy sometimes. Like, I got to go in the other room and record this real quick, or I've got to write this down, or I'll forget it. So you never know when it's going to strike.
You hear that? You hear that, kids? Having your dad be a rock star ain't always fun.
Oh, it's so boring for them. What are you doing in there for so long, Dad?
Well, are you always worried too you'll have like the best lyrics ever, but then they're always like one syllable over or under like the arrangement of every song you have?
Man, that's the one struggle of if you have a poem or some sort of lyrical content that really makes sense as a written down poem, but then when you try to fit it into the mold of a melody in a song, sometimes you just have to realize it's not going to fit that song, and put it away in the vault and save it for later. And then hopefully one day it does come to fruition and it has a purpose and a place. But I definitely have a Rolodex of old ideas that I'm always hanging on to, hoping they'll fit somewhere one day.
Yeah. Well, I've always thought that your songs, like, even if they were instrumental, like, convey, like, a lot of emotion. Like, I remember The Autumn Effect was the first album I heard from you guys, and I remember just, like, being, like, amazed that, like, you have a song as melancholy as Fault Line, but then, like, a song as, like, uplifting as a song like Pray or something like that. Like, it's fair to say that every song you've written has got to be representative of an emotion that you or Brian or the band was feeling, right?
Yeah. I mean, the one thing that I realized early on is what kind of artist I am, and the best way for me to really shine and be myself is I have to be connected to it emotionally. I have to care about it. I'm not the type of person that can get just a group of writers and freely write easy on a topic, almost like a homework assignment. It doesn't work for me that well. So yeah, everything that I do, it's safe to say I'm attached to in some way. You know, like some songs are about family members I've lost, some are about addiction struggles, some are about, I mean, it gets pretty heavy and deep in certain songs.
Yeah, I could imagine, especially like when I was listening to From Birth to Burial, or like I felt like that had like a lot of personal elements behind it.
Yeah, that album in particular was a tough one, and it sounds quite a bit different than anything else we'd ever done, because at that point everyone had pretty much, for whatever reason, life had pulled them in different directions, and it was the first signs that it was over. So we'd done something for this long, and I was just in my mind like coping with that and dealing with that, and turned it into songs and expressing it. So there's a lot of like struggle of letting go and accepting something dying or something you're losing, and that's why it was called From Birth to Burial. And even that song itself was very heavy in that topic of just, you put your whole life of energy into something, and then in a long enough timeline, everything has a shelf life or an end. Even, and not to be depressing or morbid, but we all have an end. So it's like, it's just when you're in that space, how do you deal with it?
Yeah, especially like a lot of people like think when people explore death as a subject matter, like it's them trying to be dark or edgy. I'm like, think about like death is, you could talk about it from a scientific standpoint, a spiritual standpoint, a philosophical standpoint. Like there's so many ways you could tackle like the subject matter of death or pain, and we all experience it one way or another, so it's going to relate to people whether they like it or not.
Yeah, because it is the ultimate question, because exploring death also means the question of what is life, or what's the value of life. Right? I mean, it is the ultimate question, because we will all be there. We will all face it. No one's immortal. So it's like, I think that's why it's something that people have gravitated towards time and time again, or ran from because it's too heavy of a topic. But it's definitely something that all of humanity can relate to.
Absolutely, absolutely. And you mentioned that Violent Allies kind of has like a representative of unity behind it. So is there maybe like a little bit more like optimism in a way?
Yeah, it depends on the song. Again, from what emotion, the energy. Like a good example is the newest song we released called The Unknown. Definitely has, I think, more of an optimistic vibe to it, because it's just kind of accepting that the unknown is the unknown, and just to embrace whatever happens, you know, instead of trying to be so hard in control of everything, that we have to realize we will all end up being in the unknown, whatever it may be, and to just kind of be okay with that, be comfortable with that.
Mm-hmm. And kind of going into the unknown, it's funny because I had a teacher one time who told me that when you look at all conflict in life, whether it's like a war or like, you know, like, or anything, it's all somewhat rooted into the anxiety of what happens when you die, like not knowing that.
Oh, of course. I mean, why do you think you're not supposed to talk about politics and religion, but I think we all, the reason that they say you don't is because we all are very passionate or opinionated about those topics. But that's why there's so many versions of religion. Everyone's trying to figure out what makes sense to them, whether it's a scientific religion or there's all shapes, forms, and sizes of it. It's because we're trying to individually cope.
Yeah. If there becomes a scientist where they have like proof and evidence that this is what happens when you die, and like we could experience it, or we like can die and come back to life and know what happens, I think all conflict would just go away at that point.
It would be interesting to see what would happen if we could truly know what's after this.
Definitely.
It would change a lot of things, because I think human beings, by not knowing, there is the anxiety, and it makes good art from that, because there's no right or wrong answer. We can all just dream and speculate and wonder. So I almost don't know that I would want the answer.
Yeah, absolutely. There's like a strange freedom of not knowing when and how and what happens when you die.
Yeah, that's kind of like you've seen it in movies or old stuff, where it's like if you could get the lady with the crystal ball and she could show you how old you live and how you die, would you want to see it? It's like, no. I personally wouldn't.
Yeah, definitely. Another question I had for you, I kind of had to fact check on this, so correct me if I'm wrong, but like you also work in the world of visual art as well, right? Didn't you do the artwork for Feeding the Wolves?
Yeah, I definitely have always done visual art as a small child. Like my dad taught me a lot of it, and he was an artist as well. And so yeah, as long as I can remember, I've been doodling comic books and drawing pictures of Ninja Turtles and things like that. So as really with music, I came into music late. I grew up in church and went to choir, but was very quiet, and in the background was definitely not the forefront. So the visual art was my form, my outlet, my expression, and I didn't really get into music as an art form until I was 20, pretty much. I had no idea I could sing the way I did or do any of that. It was all internalized. So I just treat music as another medium or platform of art.
That's really strange, because I thought you had classical training just with the range you were able to hit in a song like Wasteland or something like that.
No, that's just ignorant luck, I guess. I don't know. Like I knew I could sing from like being in church and stuff, and I could hear myself like singing along in choir and stuff, and knew I was carrying the melody and everything. But I was not the soloist, and I also I just was too shy. But the funny thing is my mom told me that it didn't surprise her that I ended up where I am now, because as a child I was always singing. I remember it now. I was always hearing melodies and just making up my own songs and humming them, singing them to myself constantly as a child. So it's just in there. I didn't even really. I thought it was normal. I thought everybody did that.
Yeah, and it's weird on how like sometimes your melody is like different from like the music in itself. Like when I heard like the first like subtle strumming in Wasteland, and then or maybe like even the intro to Fault Line, and then you have like a different melody over it, but it fits. That's got to be complicated to figure out.
It is if you. I think it's more complicated for people that know music and knows even theory and like what actually is supposed to work and what's not supposed to work. But again, the ignorant dumb luck that I had, which was great, is I was just doing what was natural. I had no clue what I was doing. So something like Wasteland was never planned to be like a big single or constructed to be successful. It was just what came natural.
Yeah.
So I'd like to say that I always want to keep that approach, but as you get older and you do more and you learn more and you see that we're in the entertainment business, so we do ultimately have to create something that everyone enjoys. You can't just be completely selfish to yourself. So it's as you get older, you learn all this stuff, but that freedom of just pure innocence, like Wasteland, and how it happened was just random, and it's almost the only other song that I've felt that way recently about was The Unknown, where some songs I can fight them to the bitter end to try to make it work, and then every now and then certain songs will just happen. Yeah. No struggle. It's just it all comes at once, and it's just like a flood. And that's kind of Wasteland was definitely that way, and The Unknown was very reminiscent of that.
Yeah, definitely. I definitely got like that nostalgia, when I was 13 listening to the Autumn Effect. Or no, I was 11, I think, when that album came out. So
wow.
Yeah, sorry to make you feel old, but
that's all good.
Yep, I didn't even graduate elementary school yet. But and kind of going back to the visual art, like, is there maybe a similar creative energy that you put into visual art as you do when you're songwriting, or are those like two completely separate entities?
If I do like creating, I guess a good example of that would be the song The Autumn Effect that ended up being the album title was originally a dream that I woke up, for a small period in my life. I woke up and kept a dream journal and tried to write down in detail. Like you wake up randomly to remember it and write it down. So I had this dream that I called the autumn effect, and then it turned into a painting/sculpture, like a 3D painting, and then it turned into a song, and then it turned into the album. So sometimes that kind of stuff happens where they cross over each other, and then other times they can be completely separate. But it's fun to take songs and then visualize a conceptual direction with it after the song's created. And I've definitely done that with the album cover From Birth to Burial, Feeding the Wolves. I've definitely written some treatments for some of our music videos. So it's fun to tie the two together. But then when it comes to just doing art on my own, lots of times it's nice to be completely separate as well.
Yeah, kind of like have a little creative independence, because I'd imagine, it's 10 years as a band, it's a collaborative effort. Like, I'd imagine, like, you kind of also need your creativity where there's, like, nobody in the room, like, guiding you or something like that.
Exactly, with no constraints or really no agenda or direction put upon it. It just happens.
Mm-hmm. Well, how do you know when a piece of art is done then? We kind of talked about that with the music. You mentioned that a little bit, but like at what point there has to be sort of like an instinct to let you know that when it's finished, right?
It's funny. It's back to like some things happen natural and some things are a bit of a fight or a struggle to create, finish. And I had an art teacher one time said, "Don't you know you never finish a piece, you just run out of time." And I thought that was a funny way to look at it. He also said that art is not the product you're left with, but it's the process of. So art is actually the process of creating. The product you're left with is what you give to the public or the people, or you say for yourself. But so when I think of doing all that, I think of just being in the moment, and that's it. That's truly what art is being in that creative moment.
Yeah, art is life, just like anything else.
Yeah.
Like if you want something to live forever, that's what art is going to be.
Yeah. There's a big thing on, everyone debating now and talking about stuff being changed and stuff being taken down, and it's crazy times. And there's a big debate on what do we preserve some of the past to learn from it and to move forward and have some sort of documentation of it, or if it's too heavy of a topic, do we just completely erase it? Because if it's completely erased hundreds of years from now, how will they learn from it? It's a tricky situation.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, they've always said art is meant to disturb the comforted and comfort the disturbed. So
yeah, definitely.
Yep. And like you kind of mentioned, like capturing that moment in a way, do you find it like maybe the longer you're working on something, the harder it is to kind of maintain that emotional spark or creative energy?
Definitely. The same as if you overpaint, you're going to muddy it up. It's going to lose the detail because it's been manipulated and pushed around and bent and folded and turned into itself so many times that it just muds out. So yeah, sometimes it's good to just get caught in that explosive moment of creativity and then just let it go. So but then there's other times where that moment can last longer. You can have a piece that takes a couple hours or is very short, and you can have another piece that could take a month, but it still is in a positive creative direction. Yeah.
Absolutely. I've always said it's almost kind of like teaching your kid how to ride a bike. Like, you have your hand on like their shoulders, you're guiding them as they're biking, but then eventually you have to let them go and bike on their own. So
exactly, and that's very much I think true to creativity too. At some point you have to let it lead you. You come in with maybe an idea, or you come in with what you think you might want something to be, but then when it starts to take a life of its own, you kind of just have to help it become its own thing.
Definitely. I have two more questions for you, if that's cool.
Yeah.
But this when I've seen 10 Years play, I've seen you guys play a bunch of times now, and you're always on like a variety of different bands. Like, the first time I saw you was on the tour that you did with Starset and Islander. And then, but then like you played with a band like Red and otherwise, but you've also played with a band like Apocalyptica. Like, have you noticed like maybe a different reaction depending on like the tours that you've been on?
Oh, definitely. And I think that from a business standpoint, we do that to always try to get in front of a new audience and try to expose ourselves to a crowd that we wouldn't normally be in front of, because I think as a music fan and as a listener, we all go through different moments of, I want to hear this style of music, or I want to hear something completely different. You can't eat pizza your whole life, so it's like you have to have a pretty, I guess, diverse palette in that way. And as a band, you need to at some point understand that you fit within this genre or this criteria, but it's always good to try to branch out and bring people in that wouldn't normally listen to that style of music. And that's where we've not caught ourselves, but we've ended up with some pretty different tours over the years.
Yeah, didn't you open up for like Hatebreed one time in Australia or something like that?
Oh yeah. I mean, it's the heavier stuff is it's tricky because, again, if you get some people that their favorite food is pizza and everything, they won't try vegetables, and it's pretty tough to try to feed them some vegetables. If that makes any sense. But when we do those heavier tours, I mean, we've done stuff with Mudvayne and a lot heavier bands. That's where our live show, and I think if you've seen us live a handful of times, we are a different live band depending on who we're on tour with or what album we're on. It's not the same thing every time. It's not like if you've seen 10 years once, you've seen us every time. It's a different energy. So like when we were on tour with heavier bands, you've got to up your energy just to keep the crowd that has never seen you before, and you're quite a bit lighter than the main attraction. You're going to have to like really come with some energy, and that's where I've got into like running across crowds and climbing up in the balconies and stage diving. Like, regardless of whether they like our band or not, you leave that moment in their brain like, man, that guy was crazy, he did all that stuff. And then they'll hopefully look into your stuff deeper.
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, seeing you live is like a completely different situation than like for me, like when going back to the Autumn Effect again, I feel like we're almost promoting that as much as we're promoting that Violent Allies. But like that's a very laid back record for me. You know what I mean? Like that's a very like fun, easy like listen. But when you play that material live, I mean, like it's insane. Like it's epic in a way. So like I feel like you have to almost portray yourself differently on stage than in the vocal booth.
Yeah. It's definitely a balance and a tough walk sometimes, because there's certain songs when, let's say, it's just acoustic or piano, or it's a lot smaller and softer. It's sometimes difficult to convey that live because you have to bring it down that small. But on the opposite side of that, if a song is really upbeat, high energy, and maybe screaming or really like out there vocals, that stuff just kind of takes control and turns you into that. You know, like at least for me, I grew up listening to every type of music there is other than country. That's about the only thing I never got into, which is funny considering I'm from Tennessee. But like I listen to hip hop, to metal, to all kinds of stuff. And the one thing that I always came home with is the live show, and how you can see a band or you can hear a band a bunch, or you can see their videos, but when you see them live, it's almost like you get to see them in their like human, honest form, I guess, without any kind of smoke and mirrors. And it's cool to see that. So we always try to leave an impression some way where hopefully by the time somebody leaves, they're awed in some way, one way or another.
Definitely, and I think you succeed in that regards. I remember seeing you. I actually met you at the show too at Irving Plaza when you played with with Apocalyptica, and like I remember, like a lot of people were there to see Apocalyptica. You know, they were like the headliner that night. But like I saw a lot of people like really eager to like. I saw a lot of people in Apocalyptica shirts going at your merch booth, and you know, like seeing and really getting on board with you guys. So.
Yeah, I mean, that's a great example of trying to cross lines with other. I mean, they're not completely out of our genre, but it's quite a different audience, and I think it worked. You know, that's even why in that particular tour, I was a little more theatrical with this mask I was wearing and how the show started, and like it was. I wanted to captivate early, and I wanted us to have a set that even if you didn't know us, you were kind of sucked in early to pay attention instead of go off and get a beer and use the bathroom.
Yeah, definitely. There was I think the only people disappointed at that set was the bartenders, because there wasn't that many people at the bar during that set.
Yeah, that's a good problem. Yeah,
That's a pretty damn good problem to have. So,
yeah.
before we go, I want to thank you so much for your time today. I really appreciate this. Obviously, thanks to a certain virus that I'm not naming on my outlet, is there just, obviously, you have the new album coming out in September, but obviously when, shows do pick up again and things do return to normal, I'd imagine we'll be seeing 10 years on the road quite a bit, right?
Of course. I mean, we've been road dogs for over a decade now. This is the first time in our career, and I think for pretty much all of humanity, there's the first time for everyone in this scenario of life, period. We all realized that, oh wow, we were taking for granted the freedom of just being in crowds and live entertainment. I mean, even going to a movie theater or going to a crowded bar or restaurant, like it's really taken us back to where we're gonna, hopefully we'll get close to that again, but I don't know that it'll ever be the same, just because it kind of swept us off our feet. We never saw this coming.
Yeah. Well, darkness and tragedy is always temporary, so that's how I look at it. And I could tell you...
That's great. I have to hold on to that one. I'm definitely going to keep that in mind through all this recent stuff.
Yeah, I mean, I was talking to a couple of guys who, like, my usual concert crew, and a lot of times they're like, oh, I'll only show up at the show during the headliner, or I'm leaving after this band, or whatever. No, I've had a lot of people say, I am never pulling that shit again. If there's a show, I'm going to be there from when the doors open to when they're kicking us out.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Oh, yeah, I think we will not take stuff for granted at all. Like, the lines, the wait for things, the ticket prices, like, all that stuff. It's we can't have it right now, so I think that when it does come back, the support of the entire community is going to be pretty astronomical.
Absolutely. And I already know, and a lot of people are telling me to stop saying this because I might jinx it, but I'm really confident when this is all over and we can lay it behind us, I know we will enter the best era, not just for music, but for the arts in general.
Yeah, I think that because there's a lot to be learned, but there's also, it didn't just affect like a country or a city or a family. This was global, so this affected humanity, and I think that we can look at politics and we can argue about the direction of all that BS, but what comes back more than anything that I take positive from all of this is the community of humanity is so much stronger than we've seen in forever because of overcoming things like this. And then when the riots were happening, like, we're all on board for these changes that are necessary for us to all coexist to the best of our abilities and really flourish in life.
Yep, absolutely. Like, it's not tragedy that defines us, it's how we overcome it that does.
Exactly.
Yeah. But thank you so much, Jesse. Everybody, we are here with Jesse of 10 Years, Violent Allies, coming out in September. Be sure to pick it up then. This is Alex from Heavy New York, and we will see you next time.